Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan from Chess Gyaan Academy, and this is a video series that is brought in partnership with FollowChess, where we bring you a daily coverage of 21 great players from the past who had the potential but fell very short of becoming a world champion. So we are now on day 4 of this 21-day series on the topic called the 21 Gems of Chess. And the previous days we had talked about grandmasters like Bolelevsky, Reshevsky, and so on. And today we are going to be talking about Grandmaster Paul Keres. So Paul Keres was an Estonian grandmaster, and he's also a very famed chess writer and is considered to be one of the strongest ever chess players who never managed to become a world champion. He even had some nicknames that was related to this distinction, like the Paul the Second, the Eternal Second, and so on. And Keres holds a record of defeating 9 world champions, which shows how strong of a player he was. So the game that I'm going to be discussing today, it was played between Paul Keres and Vassily Smyslov in 1939 in a tournament that was held in Leningrad and Moscow. So white starts with d4, and this was not the main weapon of Paul Keres. He had more games with one e4, but there was also a good number of chunk of games that started with d4, c4, or knight f3 and transposing into the d4 structures. So black responds knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5. So now we've reached the Queen's Gambit declined, pawn structure, and a line that's considered solid for I think close to 100 years now. I mean, at least 80 years. I mean, this game was played in 1939, and even now this is considered as one of the most reliable ways for black to handle 1d4. White goes bishop g5, the most popular move, and a very logical response. The main idea being that at some point white obviously wants to play e3, but if e3 is played with the bishop being on c1, then the bishop is kind of locked. It would not have great potential to be on an active diagonal with being on c1. So white generally likes to put the bishop on g5 or f4 or g5, so that then he can go e3 and then the bishop is outside the pawn chain. So here white played bishop g5, black goes bishop e7, and as I mentioned, white immediately goes e3 and short castle, knight f3. And in my opinion, the start of where it went wrong for black happened in this move, and that is black played b6. And I would go on to even say this is a mistake, as if you look at the database, not that many people play b6 here. I think around 3000 or some, I think 3000 games or so was on this position after b6, and the obvious main move is not b6 but it's the h6, where black was asking white what he wants to do with this g5 bishop. If white wants to play bishop takes f6 or white goes bishop h4, that's the main continuation for black in this position. And both these continuations for white here after h6 has its own share of supporters and its pros and cons. But the problem with b6 that was played by black is that white plays cd5. I would give this an exclamation mark, because in case of white goes bishop d3 or bishop e2, let's say bishop d3, then black would play d takes c4, bishop c4. So white would have technically lost a tempo with this bishop, because white initially moved the bishop to d3 then to c4. So that one tempo I think is good enough for black to get complete equality, because black would go bishop b7 castle and some sort of c5 break followed by knight d7 or knight c6 and rook c8, and black should be doing fine in my opinion. So for b6, white played c takes d5. Here black can play knight d5, but the most principal move in my opinion is e d5. And here if we look at it, the center is now stable. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of drama happening in the center of the board thanks to c takes d5. And white will be pretty happy, because even though this diagonal has opened up for the bishop, black cannot really use it to his favor in my opinion, because black has already committed b6. So if the bishop goes to e6 or g4, the b7 square would be weak. So high probability the bishop would go to b7. That means this opening up of the c8 g4 diagonal was not of any benefit for black. So that is why I think white would generally be pretty happy with the current position. White goes bishop d3, the most active diagonal for the bishop, bishop b7, queen c2, knight b d7. And it's a critical moment in the game for white, in my opinion, as white can either short castle or white can long castle, and both the moves are pretty strong. In the game, white short castle, but let's have a look at what happens if if white long castles in this particular position. If white long castles, this is a slightly sharper and a riskier move. And if, let's say, if black goes knight e4, white goes h4, trying to open up the h file in case of some knight takes g5, bishop g5, white can play h5 and big mating threats along the h file. And if f5, king b1, rook f7, and bishop f4. So now if black goes c5, so far we are following a game played between Grandmaster Del Rio de Angelis and Grandmaster Granda Juniga, and this was a game played in 2007 in Naval Moral. And in that game, white played dc5, which is a mistake. But I believe if white had played knight e5, knight takes e5, de5, with tremendous amount of pressure on the d file and some sort of knight e4 or bishop e4 coming up, and also possibly e6 kind of moves, white has a big advantage. Or white could have also gone knight g5, because if bishop g5, h g5, and now there's pressure coming down the h file, and black would not have a good defense, in my opinion. So this is if long castle knight e4. In case for long castle, if black immediately tries to open up the queen side with c5, white can play h4, rook c8, king b1. And this position is sharp, but if I have to choose a side, I would clearly favor white. The reason being, I feel white's plan to attack is pretty straightforward, because white is going to go h5, h6. And in case if black goes h6, let's say at some point, white will always have some moves like bishop f4 followed by g4, g5, and just open up. Comparatively, I feel black's attack on the queen side is not that easy compared to white's attack that can be generated on the king side. And also white's knight has a good outpost like knight e5, and you can remove some of the defenders of the black king like bishop takes f6 and so on. So given a chance, I would choose definitely white in this position. So long castle is also pretty good enough, but white decided to play the more solid short castle, and black goes h6, and white played bishop f4. This move, bishop f4, when this game was played in 1939, was a novelty / new move, as previously white had only played bishop h4 in I think 2 games that reached this position before 1939. So for bishop f4, if black goes knight h5, trying to hunt down this f4 bishop and get the double bishop advantage, white would be very glad to give up the double bishop advantage, and white would go bishop e5. The point being, if knight e5, de5, the knight on h5 is very awkwardly placed. If it's white to play, white may even actively consider more like g4 and just trap the knight. So this position is a very good advantage, like a plus equals for white, because even if not g4, white has moves like rook fd1 and put pressure on this pawn, and should be able to win some material. That is why knight h5 would be a dubious move for black. Black goes a6, and white has to complete its development, so it has to be either rook ac1 or rook fd1, and white goes rook fd1 first. This is more of prophylactic in nature, because he's kind of discouraging black from going c5, which is black's big idea. Because now if black will feel a bit uncomfortable going c5, because in case let's say d takes c5, then this rook is kind of indirectly attacking the black queen on d8, and the queen would feel pretty uneasy being on d8. So a very nice decision by white to go rook fd1 first, even though it may not make a big difference if he goes rook ac1 first or rook fd1 first. Psychologically, rook fd1 is a better move. So for rook fd1, as I mentioned, for c5, one is dc5, or also white has an option to go bishop f5, waiting to play dc5. So for rook fd1, if black goes rook e8, white can go rook ac1, bishop f8, and go bishop f5. So White's idea could be possibility to remove this knight so that he can put pressure on the c7 pawn. That's one. White can go and threaten knight e5, and white has multiple good options to increase his pressure on the position. So instead of c5 or rook e8, which are the options, black went knight e8, which in my opinion is slightly dubious compared to c5 or rook e8. So black's basic plan is that he's going to go knight e8 and then he's going to go bishop d6 and reduce the pressure on this pawn by exchanging the bishops. So should we as white, if we are playing white, should we be worried about the fact that our bishop on f4 is going to be exchanged? Not really, because for exchanging the bishop, black in return is losing time. Like he has to make a move like knight e8, he has to make a move like bishop d6. So all this critical time, white can convert into a different sort of advantage, more like an initiative, or placing the remaining pieces into better squares and so on. So white goes rook a c1, and just look at how brilliantly positioned white pieces are. Except for the knight on c3, even though that is also actively kind of creating threats on d5, I like every single white's pieces here on the board except for the knight, which can be activated in the future, but currently it's not doing much. But let's look at black's pieces here. The king, let's not talk about the king, but let's look at the other pieces. Rook f8, pretty much locked on the f8 square. Knight on e8, pretty much very passive. Queen has not really moved from the game. Rook is undeveloped. The bishop is just defending a pawn and just being very passive on b7. This bishop isn't doing much. This knight isn't doing much. And all the black pieces have not crossed their second rank. In comparison, white's three minor pieces are on white side's third rank, and the bishop is on the fourth rank. So white pieces are more developed. More white pieces are better developed, and also there are more number of white has completed development. So clearly white has got a very solid plus equals or slightly up around 0.7, 0.8 kind of advantage, I would say. So for rook a c1, black goes bishop d6, knight e2, queen e7. And here I felt the move played by Keres was not needed. The move he played was bishop takes d6. The reason why I feel so is because it is not like, black's bishop on d6 is just going to go somewhere else in a move or two. The bishop is going to be stable on d6. So at any point, white can just exchange with bishop takes d6. So it makes more sense for white to play a move like bishop h7 check, king h8, bishop f5, and wait for black to play bishop f4. Then white can take knight takes f4. So that is why I'm not very happy with bishop d6, but it's not a move like that throws away the advantage or anything. It still gives white an advantage. So here there is two captures for black, either queen takes d6 or knight d6. In the game, Smyslov preferred queen d6. Let's see what happens if knight takes d6 had been played. If knight d6, white's best move would have been knight e5. And if knight takes e5, then d e5, queen e5, queen c7, and then a very bad bishop, and this pawn is hanging, and this pawn should also at some point hang. So pretty big advantage for white in this particular line. So for knight e5, if rook fc8, if black is now ready to play knight e5, white just goes knight c6, queen e8, knight f4, and then more or less all the black's pieces are stuck to their current roles, like they can't really move from wherever they are. But in the meantime, white can play, maybe improve on the king side with h4, h5, and at some point maybe go a4, b4, b5, and establish a very solid grip on the position. So for this is what would have happened if knight takes d6 was played. Instead, black went queen d6 and white played knight g3. So black goes g6, stopping knight f5, which was the active threat by white. So after g6, if we look at it, white's pieces have reached their maximum potential, in my opinion, as of right now. So Keres decides to change the pawn structure and also try to provoke new weaknesses in black's camp. So he plays this wonderful move h4, threatening h5, and then if g5, then this diagonal is opened up, and also knight f5 would jump in. So for h4, black decided to go h5, stopping white from going h5. But when black goes h5, it allows a weakness on the g5 square, which white exploits by going knight g5. And here black went with c5, and I would suggest the viewers to take maybe a minute or two, pause the video and calculate what they would play in this position, and then resume the video. So in this particular position, White decided to choose a very fancy win, if I had to say. Uh, Instead, he could have just won straightforward some material and won the game, and that would have been knight takes h5. Wait, is this just a piece blunder, or is there an idea behind this move by White? The point being, if g h5, White has this beautiful bishop takes a6, and now White is threatening queen h7 mate, and if Black stops the mate with some sort of knight f6 or something, White can just capture the bishop on b7. White ends up with two extra pawns and possibly, just a very exposed king on g8. So knight h5, and in case if Black goes something like rook c8, White can just simply pull back queen b1, and if Black does not capture g h5, White can just move his knight back to g3 or f4 and be happy with the extra pawn, and then the h pawn would come from h4 to h5 and still open up and create an attack. So for knight h5, in case of cd4, e takes d4, rook c8, queen b1, rook c1, rook c1, gh5, and even here the same tactical shot, that is bishop takes a6, and White is just clearly winning. So this was the simplest win in my opinion, but after the 18th move, knight g5 and c5, Paul Keres decides to win in a fancy way. He goes bishop f5. The point being, if gf5, which looks like the first question should ask us, like what if Black just captures the piece? gf5, knight takes f5, and now the queen is under attack. We can't really go queen g6, because of queen g6, knight e7 check, and Black loses the queen. And in case instead of queen g6, if Black goes something like queen c7, then White has knight e7 check or knight h6. Let's look at knight e7 check, king g7, queen h7 check, king f6, and this beautiful move knight g8. And after rook takes g8, we are not taking the rook on g8 with our queen, but we are going to play queen takes f7 and deliver a checkmate. So this is why the simple piece capturing response by Black would be a big mistake. But the position is anyway terrible that the other moves not like helps Black to get equality or anything. But this g takes f5 move would be basically immediate resignation for Black if Black takes the bishop. So instead of g takes f5, Black decided to play c takes d4. And here is where we are going to see the idea that Keres had in mind. He goes bishop e6. The point being, now White is threatening queen takes g6 check. And another option for White, in my opinion, is e takes d4, rook c8, queen d3, and just go bishop h3. White is plus equals because this bishop is bad, some pressure on this knight, and in general, this knight is strong, has a strong position on g5, and always Black needs to worry about some tactical shot with knight h5 and so on. So overall, a pleasant position for White. So for bishop e6, once again, if we ask ourselves the question, can f e6 be played? No, because it's just a simple mate in 1 after knight g7, just queen h7 checkmate. And in case if Black goes some move, let's say king h8 or king h8, then knight takes f7 check and White wins more material. So that cannot be a good response. So overall, and if king g7, then there is knight takes h5 check ideas, and White's just completely dominating. So Black found a very nice intermediate move for bishop e6, and that is d3. The point of this move is that if queen d3, Black gains a very critical tempo in his defense by going knight e5, and White goes back queen b1, because you cannot really move away from this diagonal, because then f e6 would just be a simple piece for Black. So f takes e6 was played. White goes f4, trying to push this knight away so that this g6 pawn can be captured. Black goes king g7, and here White could have continued in the spirit of the game, playing more fancy chess. White could have first played knight h5 check, and if king h6, then play f takes e5. If queen takes e5, then there's a very beautiful move which is rook f1, removing the kind of like removing the one defender for the black king from f8, and also trying to access the f7 square, knight f7, and win the queen. So for rook f1, in case of black plays rook takes f1, white captures back rook takes f1, and if queen takes e3, white can simply go king h1, d4, and go knight f4. And here black's best try to keep the game going would be to go d3, queen takes d3, exchange the queens, and white has, in my opinion, better chances to win, because rook f7, rook h7 kind of ideas do exist here, with some mating nets, and also possibly knight e5, and all these pawns are big weaknesses. The king is very weak and the knights are very strong in these squares. So clearly white is a favorite in this position. So in case for 27th move, after rook f1, rook takes f1, and white played 27th move rook f1, if black played king h5, white would go g4 check, and if king h4, there's knight f3 and black loses the queen. And in case for 28 move g4, if black plays king g4, white has queen d1 check, king g3, queen e2, threatening a checkmate in 4 in this particular position. So because of all this, knight h5 is for sure a line for white to win. But Paul Keres did not play that. Instead, for 23rd move king g7, he played f takes e5. Nothing wrong with this move, but the problem was with the follow-up, as after black played queen takes e5. Now white should have just played knight h5 and transposed to the variation that we discussed in the previous move. Instead, white played rook f1, which is a mistake. And now black has an opportunity to save the game. So if you're watching this video, I would strongly suggest to pause the video for maybe 3 minutes to 5 minutes time frame, and try to calculate as much as you can and see the only chance for black to defend in this whole game, in my opinion, because the whole game black was worse or slightly worse or clearly worse or even close to losing, but now black has a realistic chance to equalize. So here in this position, black played queen takes, if black had played queen takes e3 check, then king h2, rook takes f1, rook f1, threatening rook f7 check, and the white goes knight if black goes knight f6, white can simply play rook f6. And the point being, if king f6, you have queen f1 check followed by queen f7, and it's clearly winning. So this is if black goes queen takes e3. Instead, black played rook f1, which is the most logical move, and after white captures back rook f1, now with the threat of rook f7, black went knight d6, controlling the f7 square, but the defensive resource here would have been knight f6. Would this not be same as the knight f6 kind of variation that we saw on when black first captures queen takes e3, king h2, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, knight f6? The key difference being in the game continuation where black did not go knight f6 is that the queen is still on e5 and the pawn is still on e3 and the white's king is still on g1. What the key difference is, in this line the knight on g3 is hanging, in the other line the knight on g3 was protected. So that is the big difference between this and the other line, and this difference of hanging knight on g3 favors black. So let's see what happens after rook takes f6. If queen f6, it's the same story, which is knight takes h5, g takes h5, queen f7 check, king f8, and white just captures on b7 with a threat to either go queen takes a8 or go knight h7 check and win the queen. So black is clearly losing material in this line. So for knight f6, rook takes f6 on move 27. If black captures king f6, queen f1 check, king e7, queen f7 check, king d6. So here white has two continuations, the most logical being queen takes b7. And here we see the difference why the knight on g3 being attacked or hanging makes a big difference, because here black can play queen takes g3, and if queen takes a8, queen takes e3, king f1, queen c1 check, king f2, queen takes b2, king g3, queen e5, king h3, queen f5 check, and most likely not most likely, for sure the king cannot escape from the checks of the queen, so the game will end in a draw. So another option for white, if white doesn't want to go into the straightforward draw, is on move 29 after queen f1, king e7 on move 28 and 29, queen f7 check, king d6. 30th move, instead of queen takes b7, white could try knight 3 e4 check. It's a very interesting variation, but that doesn't guarantee any advantage, but at least doesn't allow black to just force a draw or something right away. The point being, after knight 3 e4 check, if d takes e4 is played, now queen takes b7, queen d5 check, and knight f7 check, king c5, queen c7 check, king b4. If queen c6 instead of king b4, then white has b4 check, trying to push the queen away from defending the queen on c6. And if king d5, queen e5 check, king c4, queen d4 check, king b5, knight d6. And if king a4, then b5 comes with the check and black loses the queen. So on move 33, we saw the variation with queen c6, which is a mistake. So instead, black should go king to b4. And here, if white plays queen takes b6, king c4, queen b3 check, king c5, 36, queen c3, and here the b6 square, where earlier there was a pawn and white captured the pawn, helps black, as black just goes king b6 with his king and queen b4, king a7, and now white is the one who has to repeat checks and force a draw. So this is how the game would have continued if black had found the defense on 26th move with knight f6. Instead, black blundered by going knight d6, and white played knight takes h5, and as we already know, gh5 would be a mate in 1 because queen h7 check is coming for g takes h5. So instead of g takes h5, black goes king h6, white goes knight f6, now big threat, knight g4. So queen takes e3, king h1, and queen d4. So in this position, literally any move wins for white, in my opinion. White decided to go knight takes e6, queen h4, king g1, d4. And here I really like the way white won the game. I mean, it's very evident now, more or less all the white pieces are doing an active role. Even the queen, but compared to the two knights and the rook, the queen's role is slightly less. So white decides that, okay, I'll bring my queen and finish this game. So he goes queen c1 check, g5, queen c7. And now queen h7 is a threat, and it's a mate in 1 with queen h7, or queen g7 is a mating threat. So black grandmaster Vassily Smyslov decided to resign in this particular position. A very powerful game by white. Like the moment black played b6 and fell short of completing its development, we saw b6 on move 6, and this move kind of lost the speed of development for black, and white carefully exploited that. Even though white did give black a chance to possibly save the game very late in the game with knight f6 as an option. Overall, the idea by Keres to go bishop f5, bishop e6 is very creative, and I really enjoyed this game, and I saw it for the first time. I think today was the first time I saw this game, and so I hope the viewers also enjoyed this game. So everyone, as usual, stay safe. We will come out of this lockdown successfully and more energized, I believe. And signing off as Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan. And the series that we are doing here is a partnership between Chess Gyaan Academy and FollowChess, and it's titled 21 Gems of Chess. And every day we will be talking about a grandmaster who reached pinnacles of chess but maybe just fell short of becoming a world chess champion. So we are now on day 4 of this 21-day series with a new grandmaster every single day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all with a different grandmaster's spectacular game tomorrow. Bye bye.